Hello, welcome to Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Kate Harper, the 61st District in Montgomery County. In the early days of America's fascination with the automobile, Pennsylvania was in the forefront of constructing modern roads, highways, the turnpike. But flashing forward to today, that means we have some of the oldest roads and bridges in the country. A solution must be found to pay for the necessary repairs needed so that we can all travel safely and efficiently. Joining me today for Legislative Report is Pennsylvania's Secretary of Transportation, Barry Schoch. Secretary Schoch, nice to have you.
Nice to be here.
And he's here to discuss the magnitude of the problem and some possible solutions. Thank you for coming on to the show today, Secretary.
Thank you for having me, Representative. It's good to be here again.
Great. It's very nice. Well, you know, I guess what we're hearing in Harrisburg, but not so much back home, is that the governor has a plan to raise money for fixing our roads and bridges, and it involves lifting the cap on the wholesale something or other at the gas pump. Can you tell me what that's all about?
Sure. The governor's proposed a plan that will gradually uncap the oil company franchise tax, which is, right now we have a two-tiered tax system at the pump that are our user fees that we pay to rebuild our roads and bridges. Money all goes into a dedicated fund for roads and bridges. One component of it is 12 cents right at the pump, called a flat tax. The other is the oil company wholesale tax, which is at the wholesale level. It was intended to be inflationary, the price of a gallon of gas. When they wrote it back in the early 1980s, they capped it at $1.25 a gallon at the wholesale level, which translates to about $2.10 retail. That's been a long time in the rearview mirror that we saw $2.10. So
yes,
the idea
if we saw $2.10, we'd be
pretty happy, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
And so the idea is to uncap it gradually over a 5-year period, which we believe will result in about $1.8 billion of new money dedicated to roads and bridges.
Well, we're going to talk about what we can use that money for, but let's talk about something else. Most people think that if they pay $3.50 for a gallon of gas or $4 for a gallon of gas, that the Commonwealth picks up more money in gas tax at $4 than $3.50, but that's not true, is it?
No, it's not. Actually, like I said, we've been capped at $2.10 retail price. So really, once the price got above $2.10, we get the same, whether it's $2.10, $3, $3.50, or $4. We get the same tax revenue from it. So actually, had the intent of that legislation, had it not been capped when they wrote it, it'd actually be true, what people think, that we would be getting more as the price of gas went up. So that as inflation occurred, we'd actually get more revenue to offset our costs of inflation, meaning the cost of construction. Reality is we get the same, whether it's $3, $3.25, $3.50, or $4.
And whatever we do get goes into a fund that's only used for roads, bridges, and highways, right?
Motor license fund, constitutionally restricted, can only be used for highways and bridges.
So if we raise more money, that's not going to go into the general fund where it's going to get spent.
We'll spend on something else now. It can't.
Yeah,
It can constitutionally, the gas tax revenue can only be used in Pennsylvania for roads and bridges, and that's a good thing that was done back when they set up that motor license fund. My counterparts in other states, other secretaries, don't have that luxury, meaning their money does go into the general fund, and when they have a difficult time with the general fund, first thing they cut is highway spending. They say, let's just defer those projects. So there's no predictability, there's no certainty for the users that they're paying for this and it's going to go back to roads and bridges. Here in Pennsylvania, every driver out there can be certain that when they pay a dime, a penny of gas tax, it's going right back into the roads and bridges, only roads and bridges.
Okay, so the good news is any money we raise goes into roads and bridges. The bad news is that I guess it costs more to fix roads and bridges today than it did in the 80s when this tax was enacted.
Sure, if you get back to, you were talking about when we first built a lot of these roads, the going rate back when they built the interstate in the 1960s was $1 million a mile to build a 4-lane roadway.
$1 million a mile sounds like a lot of money right now.
And today it costs us $15 million a mile to rebuild it.
Wow.
So, the costs have gone up. Just like everything else, our costs go up for concrete, for steel, for bituminous material. All the building materials we use, they're different than building houses. We build things, and the cost of materials are the same for us as they are for private entities. Those costs have inflated, just as has other costs in the country.
So our costs are up, our revenues are static or down?
They're actually going down because everybody's driving more fuel-efficient cars.
Right, as the price of gas goes up, people drive more fuel-efficient cars, or they don't drive as much, so they're not paying that flat cents per gallon gas tax.
We saw actually last year, for the first time since Federal Highway started tracking it, we saw a decline in vehicle mile traveled, meaning for the first time in years and years and years, people were driving less than they had in the past. That affects our revenue. When you couple that with both people's desire to have more fuel-efficient vehicles and then federal mandates to actually increase the fuel efficiency of the fleet, it means that even if people drive the same mileage from one year to the next, because the fleet efficiency is getting greater, less gasoline is being consumed. Now, that's a good thing for our economy.
And for our environment.
For environment, even for national defense, because it reduces our reliance on foreign oil, which some of the countries that provide that are not necessarily favorable to us. But it's not so good if that's where your revenue comes to rebuild your highway system. So we're actually declining in revenue, and we expect that trend to continue and even go higher when the next round of government mandates at the federal level kick in 2016.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about what will we do with the money if the governor's plan's enacted and we can get some more money. Do we really need it?
Well, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that's happened is, you mentioned in your introductory comments, we built most of the system many, many years ago. Even this interstate was built in the 60s. It's 50 years old.
Right.
We generally like to get 70 to 80 years out of a bridge, and we try to get 40 to 50 years out of pavement. And the system, the 40,000 miles we own and the 25,000 bridges, the average age of our 25,000 bridges, average age, is 51 years old. We've built a lot of new ones in the last 10 years. But we're in a situation where if we don't rebuild and replace them, sooner or later we're going to have to weight restrict them or close them. We don't have enough money to take care of the system today. And the additional money the governor's proposed will go right back into the system to rebuild what was built for us by our parents' generation.
Right.
And make sure it's there for us to use and for the next generation to use.
Now, I know there's been a fair amount of road building in Montgomery County, so it may be tough for my viewers to understand this. But I think we're getting, we finished 309. Route 309 took us 10 years. And most recently, we opened the new Parkway 202 from the Montgomery Mall to Doylestown, which is beautiful. People actually walk up to me in the supermarket and thank me for that. So that's really good. So people have a hard time believing we don't have enough money for road building, because here we are. We've built these two gigantic projects just in the last decade.
Well, the real issue is that those are unique, by the way. We don't have many of those statewide that we're actually working on. So those are pretty unique projects that you discussed.
Yeah, I think 202 may be the only new road, really new road, in the state.
In the state. So we have a pretty big backlog of taking care of what's already out there that we need to rebuild. And then you mentioned 202. I think there's a lot of need for additional improvements on 202 that we're not going to get to if we don't get additional money.
Well, I can talk about that. Throughout my district, 202 runs down the center, and in some places it's 4 lanes, and in some places it's 2 lanes, and it sort of willy-nilly goes back and forth, and people say, what were you thinking? And to me, what were you thinking when you didn't expand the whole road? Well, we ran out of money here. That's where we are.
And if without additional money, it's going to stay in that state. It'll still be 2 lanes where there's 2 lanes and 4 lanes, as you just suggested. Nothing's going to change unless we get more money, because if we don't see any more money, what we're going to do is basic maintenance. There won't be any more projects like your 202 that you recently opened.
And we can't finish the parts that are...
We won't be able to finish the parts that we have. We'll be back out just simply doing resurfacings and taking care of bridges, because that's all the money to take care of.
Well, in our part of the state, traffic is a big problem. And so in many areas, adding a left turn lane and an intersection is a critical improvement. It really makes a big difference in how many cycles of the light you have to sit through. And on 202, those are some of the improvements we're still waiting for.
Yeah, the other thing that's going to be changing that, technology changes a lot. So we're actually investing right now in technology called adaptive signal technology, where the new technology, the signals, enables the equipment to detect how much traffic's coming in each approach and then change the timing of the signal based on the traffic that's there at the site. It processes 30 to 40% more vehicles per signal.
That would be great.
It really is. That, coupled with some lane additions, those are things that make a dramatic improvement in processing vehicles and getting more reliable travel time for folks.
It's all about a little bit more capacity. You know, if you get capacity, like a big project like 202, and you can get home 10 or 15 minutes faster, or get to a Little League game 10 or 15 minutes faster, that is huge.
It's trip reliability, especially in your area. How long is it going to take you? And when there's that variable time because of congestion where it could take 20 minutes, could take 45 minutes, if we can make that reliable to where you know when you leave that every time that trip's going to take you 25 minutes instead of potentially 45 minutes, that's 20 minutes of your life every day that you get back. It's 20 minutes sitting in traffic burning fuel that you're wasting because we're not able to solve this problem. I always say government can charge you one way or another. We can either fix the problem, charge you enough to fix the problem, or we can say, you know what, we're not going to charge you. And then while you're sitting in traffic, you're burning fuel. That's charging you too.
Well, you're spending that money either way.
Spending on gas while you're sitting in traffic.
Right. Now, I do want to talk about mass transit. But before we get to mass transit, as a Secretary of Transportation, one of the hats you wear is to sit on the the Turnpike Commission. And many people in my area use the Turnpike as a commuter road. Some 60,000 cars a day come down the northeast extension from either Quakertown or Lansdale to Plymouth Meeting, then get on the Blue Route and go from there. Or they come from Willow Grove to King of Prussia, or from Fort Washington to Willow Grove. They go back and forth. They really do use the Turnpike. Two things are concerning me about that. One is the tolls do keep rising, and the second is we understand that the Turnpike's fiscal health has had better days, let's put it that way. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, Act 44 is the reason the tolls are rising. The Act 44 was passed several years ago, which required the Turnpike to pay $450 million to PennDOT every year.
Well, in fairness, because I did support that, we needed the money.
Yeah.
For PennDOT, mass transit, and we thought we were going to get tolls on Route I-80. We even needed money for Route I-80.
Right.
That we would have gotten had that happened.
It was a two-part Act 44. We're left, because the federal government did not approve the tolling of I-80, we're left with simply the flat $450 million we take off the Turnpike every year. To do that, the Turnpike issues debt.
Yeah, they've been borrowing.
Right, borrowing it, which is not necessarily bad business practice when you have the revenue to pay back the debt. But the way you generate the revenue is raise the tolls every year, 3 to 5%. That's the way you pay the debt back. So
I think if you view it from have people stop using the Turnpike when these tolls go up, the answer is no. They're still using it.
They are, and that's why, although the Turnpike's economic health is being questioned, the reality is we're not losing ridership. And the increase in tolls of 3 to 5% per year being supported by the users. We're not seeing a drop in revenue, not seeing a drop in ridership. So we can continue to support Act 44. And the reality is most of the money stays where it's generated. So your users, that money is going back into mass transit in the Philadelphia region and into highway and bridge projects in the Philadelphia region. Same for the Pittsburgh region and for the Harrisburg region. So some of the money is going statewide, but the reality is that's why the tolls are going to go up, is to support Act 44.
All right. Well, I think we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about SEPTA and mass transit and funding for mass transit as part of this whole transportation program. So we'll be right back.
Did you know that there are 6 ornate bronze chandeliers hanging in the House chamber? The 4 large chandeliers are estimated to weigh 3 tons each, yet these iron and brass fixtures painted in 18-karat gold manage to dangle effortlessly. It takes 168 light bulbs to light the large chandeliers and 84 light bulbs on each of the smaller chandeliers. As you can imagine, changing the light bulbs when they burn out is far from easy. Workers must build scaffolding in order to reach their 1,450 light bulbs. Today, special, long-life, low-wattage energy-saving bulbs are used to lessen the amount of times that the light bulbs will need to be replaced. Now you know.
Welcome back to the program. Today I'm discussing transportation funding with my guest, Transportation Secretary Barry Schoch. I'm State Representative Kate Harper. Well, Barry, we've been talking about the need for more money so that we can fix our roads and bridges, but an awful lot of people in my area do use SEPTA, especially the seniors, because they get that preferred price from using the lottery money, and they can go into town and go to a cultural event or a sporting event and then take the train or bus back home. Of course, many people in my area also use SEPTA for commuting, although more people commute by car these days. How is SEPTA's funding handled?
Well, SEPTA's funding is, like all mass transit agencies, a combination of federal funding and state funding from our general fund. Sales tax, you mentioned the lottery. We have a lot of different sources that we sort of cobble together for our transit funding. And then, of course, the money they generate from fares, from ridership.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because some of my more rural colleagues say, why should I pay for SEPTA? I never use it and I've never seen a bus. You know, that's a common refrain from the guys who are further out. And
why shouldn't the riders pay for it themselves?
Yeah, why shouldn't they pay for it?
We hear that a lot, and you've probably heard me talk about it, Kate, in the appropriation hearings. Is the entire system is cross-subsidized. Meaning, first of all, let's talk about transit. There is no mass transit system in the world that is not subsidized in the
Not
world.
even Manhattan?
Not even Manhattan. They're all subsidized. When you go across the bridges to drive into Manhattan, part of that toll is going to subsidize mass transit. The cost of building the rail, the cost of running the buses, the cost of buying the buses and the maintenance facilities far exceeds the ability of the riders to pay for it. By the same token, most of the roads in Pennsylvania do not pay for themselves, especially rural roads with low traffic volumes. And yet, obviously, we need to get the products from the farm into market. So we need those roads. We need the transit systems. As you say, people rely on them. Matter of fact, for me, as Secretary of Transportation, I am very thankful that our forefathers invested in SEPTA. Had they not, I don't know how I'd deal with the traffic problems on a daily basis in Philadelphia. And everybody,
I don't know how you could start it anew if
right,
it didn't exist.
Exactly. And you think about what congestion is like around Philadelphia. You could imagine what it'd be like without SEPTA.
People have criticized SEPTA because it works like spokes on a wheel, so that it gets it in and out of town. But most people in the burbs now commute from one burb to another. It doesn't handle that.
And that's something that, if you look at what's the next generation of SEPTA and transit, it's to start to provide that circumferential type connections around, as you say, the spokes of the wheel. But, SEPTA is one of the best run transit agencies in the country. Just got an award for that in comparison to its peers. I think they do a great job down there, and they need more money in terms of both replacing aging equipment and able to keep the ridership up. There's a certain price point where if you raise the prices too high, you actually lose ridership.
Sure.
And so, they need a little help to make sure that we keep that price point right to attract riders. And then, as you say, suggest looking at some expansions of the system to connect the way people travel. We're actually using SEPTA as a model because here in Harrisburg, we're studying combining some of the local transit agencies into a broader regional agency, much like the SEPTA model. Because people do travel differently now. There was a time when people did go like spokes in and out of a city. Now they travel between communities to jobs. They might not move when they get a job that's 45 miles away. They might work from home a couple days a week, then want to take transit to get to work. So as a result, we need to look differently at transit going forward. But to your point about rural versus urban, the entire system has to work as a whole. And in our urban areas, we desperately need transit. In some cases, it's the only way people can get to work. In our rural areas, transit provides, in many cases, for the elderly, the only way they can get around.
Sure.
So we need all these systems to move our people. And we need healthy urban areas because that's where the majority of our revenue for transportation is generated.
Where most of our people are.
Most people that register their cars, buy driver's license, buy gasoline. That's where most of the vehicles miles are traveled. We then use that revenue to support our rural road system. So it's all cross-subsidized, and that's, in my mind, the right thing to do. But trying to isolate one and say one shouldn't be subsidized is the wrong kind of discussion to have. You could pull out, one rural road and say this road's subsidized at an 80% rate, let's close it. You wouldn't do that because you'd be cutting off the people who live there, the farms that are out there. No one would consider that, but frequently they'll turn around and point at a SEPTA or another transit agency and say, we're subsidizing that at 40%. We shouldn't do that.
Right.
Why are you okay with subsidizing rural roads at 80% and mass transit at 40%? I think you have to look at it as a whole. That's the way I look at it. I think it's the way government should look at it. It works together just as a Commonwealth should.
All right. Well, I think that's probably true. I've actually had people say to me, look, I never take SEPTA, but I want you to keep it running because I want all those people who are on that train not to get out of there and start driving their cars. So
that's the way I feel. I mean,
the other way around it.
We've got the huge project ahead of us to rebuild I-95 in Philadelphia. And we've been working with SEPTA. I think we need to add capacity to SEPTA to get more people off of 95 and into SEPTA so that it makes it easier for us to do the construction. So it's a huge benefit to everyone, whether they use it or not. As you say, it frees up space in the roadways for those who choose to drive.
Right, and actually the I-95 corridor is paralleled by a couple of SEPTA lines. Mm-hmm. So that is a place where people could get out of their cars and take SEPTA if they couldn't get down the road. Now, let's talk a little bit more about why do we now have to do this right now? I mean, I think my viewers are pretty familiar with the fact that the economy's been better. In fact, I've heard some people say that this is the worst recession since the Great Depression that they remember as children. And why do we have to spend the money now on roads and bridges? Can we just hold off and save our pennies and just limp along a little bit longer because nobody wants to pay anything more at the pump, and this might result in a little bit of a change at the pump?
Well, sure it will, and I think the reality is, though, that the last time anyone was asked to pay more was 1997. That's the last time we did a bill that changed the rates people are charged to use the
more
road
than 10
system.
years.
It's been 16 years.
Yeah, okay. Time
16
flies.
years. So yeah, it's so what's happened is, if you look at the gap between what we should be spending and what we are spending, it just keeps getting bigger. I've likened it to, should we wait? You could wait, all right, but you're just deferring it. It's not going to get better on its own. So it's a little bit like making a minimum credit card payment back when the interest rates were high, where you make a minimum payment of $25, the next month you get your bill and the balance went up. That's what's happening to us on transportation. The system doesn't get younger on its own. It's it's just like bricks and mortar at your house.
Right.
If you don't invest in it, eventually it's going to cost you a lot. So putting it off isn't going to save anyone any money. It's just going to make the bill a little bigger when we do tackle it. So the governor's proposed to gradually increase the funding over a 5-year period. We didn't get this problem overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight. Will that cause an increase at the pump? Sure it will. How much, we don't really know. Because
I myself think that you can drive around and see different gas prices, within a couple miles.
you can, and as much as 15 cents within a couple miles,
Right.
with the exact same tax structure.
And I would also maintain that the cheapest day of the week to buy gas seems to be Wednesday or Thursday, because Friday they seem to go up. I don't know why. I don't know why.
I'll have to look at that. Today I actually noticed that the price in my neighborhood had dropped like 15 cents since Friday, which, in 3 days, explain that. It seems to bump around 50 to 60 cents a gallon over the course of a year. But worst case, 5 years from now when this is fully implemented, the average driver, somebody who drives about 12,000 miles a year, would see a cost of a little less than $2 a week in additional cost in year 5. And that's if it's fully passed on. That's if this wholesale tax gets fully passed on at the pump, which we don't necessarily think is going to be the case because there's no history of that in the past. Like I said, right now, the same manufacturer, you might see, I don't want to name, but let's say a Hess or a Sunoco, the same exact chain, within a few miles will have price differences. Right. So clearly, the model for gas stations is to get you in, buy the gas, then go inside, get the bottle of water, the cup of coffee, the candy bar, clearly at a higher price than you would pay if you were buying it at a grocery store or a bulk store. But for the convenience, you're paying a little more.
They sort of draw you in with a good gas price to get you to spend more on the coffee than you would otherwise.
If you see interviews for the people when the governor first proposed this, some of the retailers were saying, well, I have to look at what my competitors are pricing it and price to that market. Meaning, if you and I have gas stations on opposite corners and you drop yours by 5 cents, I pretty much have to drop mine by 5 cents.
Okay.
Now, might I raise the price of coffee by a nickel or a dime to make up the same revenue? Probably. But the point is that we don't really know what's going to happen.
The price of gas is determined by a lot of things.
Many things.
Taxes being one of them.
The least of which is taxes. About 60 to 70% is in the wholesale price of crude and in the refinery costs, and then marketing costs and advertising and transport costs. But only about 10 or 11% of the price of a gallon of gas is made up of taxes. The rest is all those other factors.
All those other things. All right, let's talk a little bit about how we can save money with automation. I'm specifically referring to the Turnpike's idea to go to an all Easy Pass system, and also a marvelous machine I saw at the PennDOT headquarters that opens envelopes and takes a picture of the check and deposits it, and I was astonished by that. Can we save money and do this better if we employ more automation?
Well, absolutely. Technology changes, and I've often said, I spent my career in the private sector, and I used to tell my colleagues all the time, look, if we're not changing in our company, somebody else will. And even if we're a leader right now, our competitors are going to keep trying to be cutting edge, and we're going to fall behind if we're not changing. Government has to do the same thing. Technology changes around you. Business practices change. How do we become more efficient? You mentioned we call it the Eagle, the machine that sorts and scans checks and deposits them electronically.
It was astonishing. They showed us maybe 1,000 envelopes go through it and get opened, and all the checks were taken out and photographed and put into the bank.
And that used to be hundreds of people that did that work. And
it
now
took like a minute.
And what we're going to do is we're actually going to take that over for DCNR for they register ATVs and snowmobiles, but they were doing it manually. And Secretary Allen and I got together and we were looking at our agencies. There's some overlap, and we said, how can we eliminate the overlap to reduce costs? And that was one area that they're now going to use our machine, just put a different barcode on for an ATV and a snowmobile. And we process more in an hour than they process in a year.
And it was astonishing.
Yeah.
Now the other thing is at the Mid-County intersection between the Turnpike and the Blue Route and the Northeast Extension, going in some directions, you can go through the tolls without stopping, without going through a toll booth or anything like that. You just drive under this bar. And apparently the Turnpike's been thinking about putting that in other places.
Well, we want to do a system-wide, frankly. We want to go to an all-electronic toll system for the Turnpike. Every toll agency in the world is planning on going cashless. It's cheaper to operate. It's more efficient for vehicles. It's better for safety because you don't have low-speed people pulling out of cash lanes, merging with high-speed traffic. It reduces emissions because you're not stopping trucks and restarting them. So it's by far, both for the driver and for the owner, the better way to go. So our plan is to, the 29 interchange we just opened up, all electronic. Our plan is to someday, within the next 5-6 years, be all electronic on the Turnpike and start that process. It may take a decade to do the entire system. We'll start in the higher volume areas, but the idea is to go cashless, all electronic tolling, much more efficient for us.
Save some money.
Save us money, and mean for the same toll structure, we'll put more money back into the roads.
So are there other innovations like the Eagle machine or the tolling that we can do in Pennsylvania to save money?
Absolutely. At PennDOT, we have an effort we're calling Next Generation. And we set a separate team up within the department to go through and analyze every business practice. And so far, the things that we've done, like using the Eagle for DCNR, we have an effort called Mapping the Future with the Turnpike, where we're looking at sharing resources.
Sure, you both have maintenance vehicles,
right.
You both have crews that do salting and
right.
snow plowing.
Same with DCNR, a
like
lot of overlap there. So we're trying to eliminate that overlap. So far, the summary of what we believe we've saved are $50 to $70 million every year. Now, at a cost of $1.5 million a bridge, that's another 40 bridges we'll do with the same money.
That's great.
And we're not stopping there. The Next Generation effort is going to continue. As a matter of fact, if your viewers are interested, they can go to our website, and there's a button called Modern PennDOT. If they click on it, they will actually get a summary of everything we've done and where we're heading with different studies. We've even brought the private sector in with the group we call the State Transportation Innovation Council, where we have private companies and research organizations come in and make suggestions to us of things we could do differently to use new products, new materials, new procedures to reduce costs.
And I also noticed that SEPTA's talking about doing that too, that they're going to have little cards
Smart card.
use instead of cash and things like that. So the mass transit agencies will be able to do something like that too.
Well, you know, technology, you think about it, Kate, I think someday your driver's license and registration are going to be in your smartphone.
I was going to say everything's going to be on the
It
phone,
is, and I think you're fair. You know,
I'll have to take one of my children with me to show me how to work it.
Get a kid to go with you, that's right.
Yeah.
But I went to Philadelphia today, down and back with Amtrak, and people were just getting on with their smartphones, and I had a printout of mine, but they just scan it. You don't actually give them a ticket anymore. And the guy sitting beside me just held his phone up, and the conductor just scanned it, and that was it. So I think someday, as the technology keeps getting better, that's going to be the way we deal with everything in our industry, which is going to be just on your smartphone.
Well, if it saves us money, it'll leave more money to do those roads and bridges that we have to do.
The core function for us is safety. All right, that's our business, is provide a safe and efficient transportation system to support the lifestyles and economy of Pennsylvania. And the big focus is safety. If we can use technology to save money, to put more money back into roads and bridges to make them safe, that's what we should be doing. And that's our entire efforts on Next Generation are free up as many dollars as we can to put back into physical, concrete, and bituminous material. That's what the public drives on. That's what they're relying on us at PennDOT to deal with. Right now, we don't believe we have the resources necessary to keep up with the infrastructure. That doesn't mean we're ever going to stop trying to stretch every dollar we get, whether we get more or not.
Well, hopefully we'll get more, because I think we need it.
We do.
But I think that's a good place to end. And then anyway, it's all the time we have for today's program. I'm State Representative Kate Harper. If you need assistance with any state government matter, feel free to contact me at my local office in Bluebell. The address and phone number will be shown in just a moment. Thanks for watching. Join me again for Legislative Report. And thank you, Secretary Barry Schoch, for joining me.
Thank you, Kate.